Howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome to another episode of Storytime with Freak, where we are going to continue our journey through Neil Shusterman's The Toll. My allergies are acting up today, so we're not going to talk much. We're just going to dive straight on in with Chapter 28, Dark Celebrity. Everyone was invited, and when the Overblade sets forth an invitation, it was not to be ignored, which meant the stadium would most certainly be filled to capacity. Goddard had put out a public call to all souls under the umbrella of his influence. It was a rare thing for a scythe, much less a powerful scythe, to have anything to do with ordinary people. Communications with the rest of humankind were usually limited to bullet, blade, bludgeon, and the occasional poison. Scythes simply didn't feel the need to speak to the masses. They were not elected officials and had no one to answer to besides one another. There was no reason to win over the hearts of the people when your sole purpose in their lives was to stop those hearts from beating. So when Overblade Goddard himself personally broadcast the invitation, people everywhere took notice. In spite of his fortified tower, Goddard claimed to be a scythe of the people, and here was the evidence. He was willing to share his triumph with the ordinary people in all walks of life. In the end, people's craving to be close to the Consistent's most celebrated scythes was stronger than the fear of them. Tickets were gone within 5 minutes of being made available. Everyone else would have to view the event from their homes and places of business. And for those lucky enough to get those tickets to the execution, they knew they'd be witnessing history. They could tell their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren that they were there the day that Scythe Lucifer was gleaned. They didn't fear Scythe Lucifer the way Scythes did, but they did despise him, because not only did they blame him for the death of Endora, but also the silence of the Thunderhead and their own unsavory status. The world was being punished for his actions. He was, as Goddard so bluntly put it, the receptacle of the world's hatred, so naturally they would show up in force to witness his terrible end. There were no longer such things as armored vehicles. Most vehicles were impenetrable by nature now. Even so, a special transport truck was built in a matter of days for Scythe Lucifer, complete with visible steel rivets and barred windows. It was a straight line on a high-speed highway from Fulcrum City to Mile High City, where his gleaning would take place. But the route the motorcade took was a serpentine meander that passed through as many mid-American cities as possible before arriving at its destination. A drive that would have taken a day took nearly a week. Rowan knew his gleaning would be exploited for its public relations value, but he had not expected to be flaunted in this way. There were more than a dozen vehicles in the motorcade, members of the Blade Guard on motorcycle, fancy limousines in the colors of the high-ranking scythes that rode him, all leading up to the big, boxy armored truck and followed by a few more motorcycle guards trailing behind like a bridal train. The Overblade himself was not present. Even though the first limo was royal blue and studded with glimmering stars, there was no one in it, but the masses didn't know that. The truth was, Goddard couldn't be bothered to take a long, laborious journey when he could get there in the same effect by just pretending to be there. He wouldn't have to show up until the actual day of the gleaning. Instead, he put Constantine in charge of escorting the dread Scythe Lucifer to his ultimate doom. Constantine, Rowan knew, had been in charge of finding him and taking him down 3 years ago. His crimson road and limousine were the same color as the public enemy stamp on the side of Rowan's transport truck. He wondered if that was intentional, or just a happy coincidence. Before they left Fulcrum City, Constantine had paid Rowan a visit once he had been loaded into his high-security truck and shackled. "All these years I wanted to lay his eyes on you," Constantine said, "and now that I do, I am profoundly unimpressed." "Thanks," said Rowan. "I love you too." Constantine reached into his robe as if to grab a blade, but thought better of it. "If I could glean you here and now, I would," he said, "but the ire of the Overblade Goddard is not something I wish to arouse." "Understandable," said Rowan. "If there's any consolation, I'd rather be gleaned by you than him. And why is that?" "Because for him, my death will be vengeance. For you, it would be satisfying a 3-year mission. I'd much rather satisfy that than Goddard's vendetta." Constantine took that in stride. He didn't become any softer, but he no longer seemed on the verge of an explosion that he would regret. "Before we drive you to your well-deserved end, I want you to know something," Constantine said. "I want you to know why you did. Why did I end Scythe's Renoir, Philomore, and the rest?" He waved his hand. "Not that. As much as I detest your Scythe ending spree, it's obvious why you chose the ones you did. They were all questionable Scythes, and you passed judgment on them, even though it was not your judgment to pass. Those crimes are more than enough reason to glean you, but what I want to know is why you killed the Grandslayers. They were good men and women. The worst of them was Nocrates, but even he was a saint compared to the others you ended. What possessed you to do such an unspeakable thing?" Rowan was tired of denying the blame. What did it matter at this point, so he gave Constantine the lie that everyone already believed. "I hated the Scythedom for denying me the ring," Rowan told him, "and so I wanted to damage it as much as I could. I wanted every Scythedom around the world to pay for refusing me to make me a true Scythe." Constantine's glare could have melted through the steel in the transport truck. "Do you expect me to believe that you're that small-minded and petty?" "I must be," said Rowan. "Why else would I sink in Dura?" Then he added, "Or maybe I'm just plain evil." Constantine knew he was being mocked, and he did not take it well. He left and had nothing more to say to Rowan for the entire journey, but not without the grimmest of parting shots. "It is my pleasure to tell you that your gleaning will be a painful one," the Crimson Scythe said, oozing bitterness. "Goddard intends to roast you alive." Rowan had brand new shiny shackles that had been forged just for him, steel chains that clanged on the door of the floor of the transparent truck when he moved. They were long enough to allow him plenty of mobility, but solid enough to make it hard to actually move. It was beyond overkill. Just because he had a knack for slipping free did not make him the escape artist that they thought he was. All of his previous escapes were due either to someone helping him or the incompetence of the people detaining him. He wasn't exactly going to bite through the chains and kick open the steel door, yet everyone acted like he was an otherworldly beast with superhuman, supernatural powers. But then, maybe that's what Goddard wanted people to think, because if the creature you captured needs to be chained and locked in a steel box, you must be one hell of a hunter. In every city of the town they passed through, people came out in droves to watch the motorcade go by, as if they were a holiday parade. The barred windows in the transport truck were at various heights, larger than ought to be on an armored vehicle, and the interior was brightly lit. Round soon came to realize the reason for this. The windows were placed so that no matter where he positioned himself in the truck, he could still be seen from the outside, and the bright interior ensured that he would not be hidden in the darkness, no matter the time of day. As he rolled down boulevards and main streets, there was always a view of him for the gauntlets of the looky-loos on either side. Occasionally, he looked out at a window, and when he did, the crowd's excitement peaked at his peeking. They pointed at him, took photos, and held up children to see the young man who had become a dark celebrity. A few times he waved to them, which got people tittering to one another. A few times he pointed back at them when they pointed at him, which always seemed to scare them, as if his angry, restless ghost would come for them in the middle of the night once he was gleaned. Through all of this, Constantine's bleak pronouncement kept coming back to him, the manner in which Rowan would be gleaned. Hadn't gleaning by fire been outlawed? Goddard must have reinstated it, or thought maybe because it was for one special gleaning. As much as Rowan tried to tell himself he didn't fear it, he did. Not the gleaning, but the pain. And there would be quite a lot of it, because Goddard would certainly turn off his pain at night so that Rowan would feel every last measure of misery. He would suffer like the heretics and witches of the more ignorant times. The idea of his life ending was not much of a problem for him. In fact, it had become an oddly familiar theme. He had died so many times and in so many ways he was used to it. It held no more terror for him than falling asleep, which was often worse because when he slept, he had nightmares. At least being deadish was a dreamless state, and the only difference between being deadish and being dead was the length of time involved. Perhaps, as some believe, true death ultimately brought people to a glorious new place, unimaginable to be living. In this way, Rowan tried to soften the prospect of his fate. He also tried to soften it with thoughts of Citra. There had been no word of her, and he wasn't foolish enough to ask Constantine or anyone else for that matter because he had no idea who knew that she was alive. Goddard certainly knew. He had sent the High Blade of West America to retrieve them both, but if Citra had escaped, the best way to help her was to not speak of her in hostile company. Considering where Rowan's winding path was leading him, he could only hope she was in better circumstances. Chapter 29, The Obvious Bear. 3 dates. That's all that was within the folded swan. 1 in the year of the lynx, a 2nd in the year of the bison, and a 3rd in the year of the heron. All years before she was even born. It didn't take long for Anastasia to figure out why those dates were important. That was the easy part. Whether people knew the actual dates or not, the events they marked were part of everyone's history curriculum. But on the other hand, those were the official accounts, the accepted ones. Nothing in history was a first-hand account, and things known really meant things that were allowed to be known. Ever since becoming a scythe, Anastasia had seen how the scythedom throttled back the flow of information when it felt the need for defining history if any way if it chose. Perhaps not falsify things, for the Thunderhead did have jurisdiction over facts and figures, but the scythedom could choose which facts were fed to the public. But any information selectively ignored was not forgotten. It still existed in the back brain for anyone to access. In the days of her apprenticeship, Citra had become an expert at sifting through the Thunderhead's back brain when trying to find Scythe Faraday's killer. The algorithms of the Thunderhead's filing system were much like the human brain. All order was by association. Images weren't organized by date, time, or even location. To find an ivory scythe standing on a corner, she had to sort through images of people in ivory standing on corners everywhere in the world, then narrow it down by other elements of the scene. A particular type of street lamp, the length of shadows, the sounds and scents in the air, because the Thunderhead cataloged all sensory input. Finding anything was like finding a needle in a haystack on a planet of haystacks. It took ingenuity and inspiration to figure out what parameters would narrow down the near infinite field of information. Now Anastasia's challenge was even greater than before, because then she knew what she was looking for. Now, she knew nothing but dates. First, she studied all that was known about the disasters in question. Then she plunged into the back brain to find original sources and information that had been conveniently left out of the official records. The biggest obstacle was her lack of own patience. She could already sense that the answers were in there, but they were buried underneath so many layers she feared she'd never find them. As it turns out, Anastasia and Jerry had arrived just a few days before the Lunar Jubilee. On every full moon, Highblade Temenkaman threw a huge party that lasted 25 hours, because 24 simply isn't enough. There were all forms of entertainment, hordes of professional partiers, and food flown in from around the globe for his invited guests. Dress for the event, but without your scythe's robe, and stay by my side with a party person or two, Tenka had advised her. You'll just be part of the scenery. To Jerry, the Highblade just said, enjoy yourself within reason. Anastasia was reluctant to even be there for fear of being recognized, and much rather would have continued her search through the back braid, but Ten Kamenin insisted. A break from the drudgery of dredging will do you good. I'll provide you with a colorful wig, and no one will be the wiser. At first, Anastasia thought it was irresponsible and foolhardy to suggest a simple disguise could conceal her, but since the last thing anyone was expecting was a long-dead scythe to show up at a party, much less one wearing a neon blue wig, she was remarkably hidden in plain sight. A lesson for your research, he told her. That which hides in plain sight is the most difficult thing to find. Tenka was the consummate host, greeting everyone personally and granting immunity left and right. It was all stunning and fun, but it didn't sit well with Anastasia, and the Highblade read her disapproval. Do I seem wastefully self-indulgent to you? Tenka asked her. Am I horribly hedonistic, Highblade? Goddard throws parties like this, she pointed out. Not like this, said Tonka. And he likes his homes larger than life, too. Is that so? Then Tenka beckoned her closer so she could hear her more clearly amid the revelry. I want you to take a look at the people before you tell me what you see, or more at the point, what you don't see. Anastasia took in the view. People in a multi-level pool, others dancing on balconies, everyone in bathing suits and bright party clothes. Then she realized, there are no scythes. Not one. Not even Makeda and Baba. Every guest is a family member of someone I gleaned since the last full moon. I invite them here to celebrate the lives of their lost loved ones, rather than to mourn and to grant them their first year of immunity. And when the celebration is over and the grounds are cleared, I retreat to my glorious suite. He indicated the largest window in the mansion, then winked and slid his finger to the right until he wasn't pointing at the palace anymore, but to a small shack at the edge of the property. The Toolshed? That's not a toolshed, he said. It's where I live. The palace suites are all reserved for honored guests like yourself, as well as guests who are less honored but need to be impressed. As for my toolshed, as you call it, it's a replica of the home I grew up in. My parents believed in simplicity, and of course they had a son who enjoyed endless complication. Yet I still find comfort at night in the pleasantness of a plain dwelling. I'm sure they must be proud of you, Anastasia said. Your parents, I mean. Highblade Ten come in and sniffed at the suggestion. Hardly, he said. They took simplicity to an extreme. They're tonists now. I haven't spoken to them in years. I'm sorry. Did you hear the Tonist said a prophet? Tenka said bitterly. He appeared shortly after you took your deep dive. They claimed the Thunderhead still spoke to him. Tenka gave a rueful chuckle at the thought. Of course, he got himself gleaned. A waiter approached with a tray of shrimp that appeared too large to be real, no doubt a product of the Thunderhead's experimental abundance farms. As always, the Thunderhead got it right. They tasted even better than they looked. How are your efforts going? Ten come in and asked her. They're going, she told him, but the Thunderhead links things in confusing ways. I pull up an image of the Mars colony and it takes me to a child's drawing of the moon. A news report from the New Hope orbital station leads to a lunch order in Istanbul from a scythe I've never heard of. Dante something or other. Alighieri? Said Tenka. Yes, that's it. Do you know of him? I know of him from Euroscandia, I believe. He's long gone. Might have self-gleaned maybe 50, 60 years ago. It's like every other link I've found. None of them make sense. Go down every rabbit hole, Tenka advised, because some of them might actually have rabbits. I still don't understand why you can't just tell me what I'm looking for. Tenka sighed and leaned close to whisper. The information we may have come from another scythe before she self-gleaned. A clearing of her conscience, I imagine. Other than that, we have no actual evidence, and our own digging through the back brain has been fruitless. We are being hindered because we know what we're looking for. While one searches for a man in a blue hat, one totally misses the woman in a blue wig. He gave a little flip to one of her neon curls. Although it was counterintuitive, she had to admit it made sense. Hadn't she seen Tenka walking toward the toolshed each day, but her own assumptions never allowed her to guess the reason? She recalled a Mortal Age video a teacher had once shown her class. The objective was to count how many times a ball was passed between teammates shifting around the screen. She got the answer right, as did most people in the class, but everyone completely missed the man in a bear suit who danced his way right into the middle of the scene. Sometimes finding the obvious means coming in with no expectations. The next morning she had a breakthrough and ran to Tenka's cottage to let him know what she had uncovered. His home was modest in a way that even Scythe Faraday would have approved of. She found Tenka in the middle of something. Directly in front of him were two other people not looking all that happy to be there. More than unhappy, they were miserable. Come in, my friend, Tenka said when he saw Anastasia. Do you know who this is? He asked his other two guests. No, your excellency, they said. She is my florist, he told them. She fills the palace and my home with the most lovely arrangements. Then he focused his attention on the more nervous of the two, a man who seemed to be nearing 40, perhaps ready to turn the corner. Tell me, your dearest dream, said the Highblade. What do you want to do more than anything in the world but not have yet done? The man hesitated. Don't hold back, prompted Ten Kamenin. Don't be modest. Tell me your dream in all of its garish glory. I want a sailing yacht, he said like a little boy on a Father Holiday's lap. I want to sail it around the world. Very well, said the Highblade, clapping his hands once as if that sealed the deal. We'll go shopping for sailing yachts tomorrow. My treat. Your Excellency? The man said, incredulous. You'll have your dream, sir. 6 months of it. Then you'll return here, tell me about it, and then I will glean you. The man was ecstatic. In spite of being told that he was going to be gleaned, he was happy as could be. Thank you, your Excellency, thank you. Once he had left, the other man, a bit younger and less frightened than he was before, turned to the Highblade. "What about me?" he asked. "Do you want to hear my dream? My friend, life can be often most brutal and unfair. Death is the same." Tenkamenon swung his hand in a quick arc. Anastasia never even saw the blade, but in an instant the man was on the floor, clutching his neck, releasing his last breath. He had been gleaned. "I will alert his family personally," Tenkamenon told Anastasia. "They will be invited to the next lunar jubilee." Anastasia was surprised by the turn of events, but not shocked. Each scythe had to find his or her own way of doing things. To realize one random soul's dream while denying another's was a reasonable as method as any. She'd seen good scythes do a whole lot worse. The cleanup crew came in from another room, and Tenka escorted Anastasia out to the patio where breakfast was waiting. "Did you know that you were my inspiration?" he told her. "Me?" "By your example, actually allowing people to choose their own method of gleaning and giving them notice ahead of time. Unheard of, but brilliant. Such compassion is lacking among us. We're all about efficiency, getting the job done. After you were lost on Endura, to honor you, I decided to change my gleaning style. I would allow half of those I glean to first live their dream. Why just half? Because if we truly are to emulate death as it once was, it must be fickle and capricious," he said. "One can only sugarcoat it so much." Tenka filled a plate with eggs and fried plantains and set it in front of Anastasia before making a plate for himself. How strange, thought Anastasia, that death has become so commonplace for us scythes that we can take a life and take breakfast in the next moment. Tenka took a bite of cassafou, chewing the dense bread as he spoke. "You've not gleaned once since you arrived. Understandable under the circumstances, but you must be itching for it." She understood what he meant. Only New Order scythes truly enjoyed the act of gleaning, but others would feel a vague but persistent need if they went too long without it. Anastasia couldn't deny that she'd come to feel that too. She imagined it was the way one's psyche adjusted to being a scythe in the first place. "What I'm going to do in the back brain is more important than gleaning," she told him, "and I think I found something." She told him what she had uncovered. A name. Carson Lusk. Not exactly the mother lode, but a starting point. He's listed as a survivor, but there's no record of his life after that date. Of course, it could be a mistake, but he actually did die with the others. Tenka smiled broadly. "The Thunderhead does not make mistakes," he reminded her. "It's a solid lead. Keep digging." He eyed her plate, then scooped more plantains onto it like a parent concerned with their child's skimpy eating habits. "We would like to start making live broadcasts," he told her. "Rather than us officially telling the world you've returned, we think you should do it yourself." Scythe Anastasia in her own words. I'm not much of a performer," she told him, and thought back to her awful performance in Julius Caesar. She was only on stage to glean the lead actor, as per his wishes, but she still had to act the part. She was a terrible Roman senator, except for the stabbing part. "Did you speak your mind and your heart to the Grand Slayers when you brought your inquest?" Tenka asked. "Yes," admitted Anastasia, "and their friend Scythe Pasuelo tells me that, in spite of what the world believes, you convinced them to make Scythe Curie Highblade of Mid-America." Anastasia grimaced involuntarily at the mention of Scythe Curie. "Yes, I did." "Well, if you can stand before the 7 seats of consideration and argue a case of the most intimidating elegy of scythes in the world, I think you'll do fine." That afternoon, Tenkamenon took her off to the compound to show her the city he was so proud of. Port Remembrance was bustling and full of life, but the Highblade did not want her to leave their car. The Jubilee is one thing, it is a controlled environment, but out here there's no telling who might see you and recognize you, he said. But it turned out there was another reason he didn't want her to leave the vehicle. As they neared the center of the town, they began to encounter Tonists. First just a few, but soon they started to gather on either side of the road, glaring at the Highblade's car. Anastasia had mixed feelings about Tonists. The less extreme ones were all right, friendly and often kind, if somewhat persistent in the pushing of their beliefs. Some, however, were insufferable, judgmental, intolerant, the opposite of what Tonism claimed to be about. The sibilants made their other zealots seem tame. That was the brand of Tonism that had taken root in Tenkamenon's region. Ever since the toll was gleaned, these splinter groups have become more and more extreme, Tenkamenon told her. As if to prove his point, when enough of them were gathered by the roadside, they began throwing stones. Anastasia gasped when the first stone hit the car, but Tenkamenon was unperturbed. "Don't worry, I can't do any damage, and they know it. I'm sorry you have to see this." Another rock hit the windshield, split in two, and bounced off. Then all at once the attackers stopped throwing stones and began to intone, emitting a droning, wordless wailing, yet somehow this was far different from the other Tonists that she had heard. Tenkamenon ordered the car to put on music, but even so, it didn't entirely drown them out. "The entire sect has taken a vow of silence," Tenkamenon had told her, not hiding his disgust. "No speaking, just this blasted ugly noise. The Thunderhead had always frowned on delinguination, but when the Thunderhead fell silent, these Tonists decided they could do as they pleased, which is why their howling sounds even worse than usual." "Delinguination?" asked Anastasia. "I'm sorry," said Tenkamenon. "I thought you understood. They've cut out their tongues." Jerry was not invited on the tour of Port Remembrance. While the captain's crew indulged in more free time than they'd had in years, Jerry remained in Tenkamenon's compound, keeping an eye on Anastasia, making sure she was being treated well and was being kept safe. Jerry was never a selfish person, always putting the crew of the Spence first. This was a good captain's way. The desire to look out for Anastasia went beyond that. Tenkamen was a careless man. Yes, he provided protection for Anastasia, but was his staff vetted? And the fact that he practically flaunted Anastasia's presence at the Lunar Jubilee made Jerry wonder whether the Highblade had any common sense whatsoever. Jerry didn't trust the man and knew the feeling was mutual. And then came Anastasia's sibilant afternoon in Port Remembrance. Anastasia came to talk to Jerry about it when she had returned, unable to keep it all in. Each day it's like I'm hit over the head by how much the world has changed while I was out of it, Anastasia said. The world has survived worse, Jerry told Anastasia while she endlessly paced. We survived the mortal age that could possibly worse... What could possibly worse than the horrors of that? Pardon me. But she could not be consoled. Yes, but without the Grand Slayer's Scythedoms are practically at war with one another, as if it weren't the mortal age all over again. Where are we heading? Upheaval, Jerry said matter-of-factly. Mountains are created by upheaval. I'm sure it doesn't look pretty at the time. It only aggravated her further. How can you be so calm about it? And Tenkamenen's even worse than you. He just accepts all this like it's nothing. Like it's passing shower instead of a hurricane that's going to tear everyone apart. Why is everyone so blind? Jerry sighed and put a hand on Anastasia's shoulder, forcing her to stop pacing. This is why I'm needed here, Jerry thought. To be the second voice in her head, wrangling in the panicking one. There's an opportunity in every disaster, Jerry told her. A ship goes down. That's when I get excited. Because I know there are always treasures in the wreckage. Look what I found at the bottom of the sea. I found you. And 400,000 scythe diamonds, Anastasia pointed out. My point is you need to approach this like a salvage operation. In salvage, the first thing we do is carefully assess the situation before we make a move. So I should just sit by and watch, observe, learn everything you can, and then, when you do move, you move decisively. And I know when the time comes, you will. Highblade Tenkamenen insisted on formal dinners every night. His entourage of scythes was expected to be there, as well as his honored guests, and since Anastasia and Jerry's arrival, Tenkamenen made sure there were no other guests. It was one thing to throw a party for locals, and another to expose Scythe Anastasia to dinner table scrutiny. When Jerry arrived that night, Anastasia was already there, along with the Highblade and Scythes Baba and Makeda. The Highblade himself was laughing uproariously at something someone had said, or more likely something he himself had said, while Anastasia enjoyed the man, Jerry exhausted of him after their first day. You've missed the first course, he told Jerry. No soup for you! Jerry sat beside Anastasia. I'll survive. House rules dictate that you be on time for dinner, Tenkamenen reminded him. It's a matter of common courtesy. It's Jerry's first time late, offered Anastasia. You don't have to defend me, Jerry told her, and then turned to the Highblade. I was being updated on the Endura salvage, if you must know. They found the council chamber. The Grand Slayer's seats of consideration are being sent to their respective continents to be turned into monuments. I think that was a little more important than soup. Tenkamenen did not comment, but 5 minutes later, during the main course, he prodded Jerry again. Tell me, Jericho, how does your crew feel about having an absentee captain? Jerry would not be baited. They are on leave in your city and grateful for it. I see. And how do you know they are not out making deals without you? Deals that might compromise the security of our dear Lady of the Deep, he said, using his latest pet name for Anastasia. Do not cast your aspersions on my crew, Your Excellency, Jerry said. They are loyal to a fault. Can you say that of your people you surround yourself with? That raised the Highblade's hackles, but he did not defend his entourage. Instead, he changed the subject. What do you want out of life, Captain Soberanus? That's a broad question. Then let me rephrase it. Tell me your dearest dream, Jericho. What do you want to do more than anything in the world but have not yet done? Suddenly, Anastasia dropped her silverware so hard that it chipped her plate and she stood up. I've lost my appetite, she said, then grabbed Jerry's hand. And so have you. And she stormed away, leaving Jerry no choice but to go with her, if only to keep the hand. Behind them, Tenkamenen burst out laughing. It was a joke, Anastasia. You know I love to toy. She turned long enough to spare him the harshest of glares. You are an excellent ass, Your Excellency, which only made him laugh harder. Jerry was not entirely sure what the inside joke was until they reached Anastasia's suite and she closed the door behind them. It's what he asks people he's going to glean, she said. Ah, said Jerry. He did it to get a rise out of you, which he did. The Highblade enjoys pushing people's button, and he knows exactly where yours are. Aren't you the least bit worried that he might actually do it? Not at all, Jerry told her, because as much as he likes to toy with me, he doesn't want you to turn against him. If he gleans me, he knows he'll be your enemy. Even so, she held out her hand, the one with the scythe's ring. It wasn't her old ring. The one Scythe Pasuelo had hurled back into the sea after they had found her, since it could be used to trace her whereabouts, if there was actually a Scythe out there who understood their own technology. Pasuelo had given her a new ring using one of the diamonds from the vault. Kiss it, Anastasia said to Jerry, just to be safe. So Jerry took her hand and kissed it, missing the ring entirely. Anastasia pulled her hand back reflexively. I meant the ring, not the hand. She held it out again. Do it right this time. I choose not to, Jerry said. If I give you immunity, no one can glean you for a year. Do it. But still, Jerry made no move, and when her eyes questioned, Jerry said, when I found the Vault of Relics and Futures, Pasquale also offered me immunity, but I refused him as well. Why? What possible reason is there? Because I don't want to be indebted to anyone, not even you. She turned away at that and went to the window, peering out. There are things out there that I don't want to know about, but I need to know about them. I need to know everything I can. Then she turned back to Jerry. Have you heard anything about Rowan? She asked. Jerry could have told her that there was no news, but that would be a lie, and Jerry would not lie to Anastasia. They had too much trust between them to jeopardize that. Jerry was silent for a moment, and Anastasia pushed. I know Ten Commandment won't let any news about him reach me in here, but you've been in touch with your crew. They must have told you something. Jerry heaved a sigh, but only to prepare her for the answer. Yes, there is news, but nothing I'm going to share, no matter how much you ask me. A progression of emotions passed over her. The stages of grief all played out on her face in a matter of seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and finally, resolving into acceptance. You won't tell me because there's nothing I can do, she said, anticipating the reasons Jerry would give, and it would distract me from what I need to do. Do you hate me for it? Jerry asked. I could say yes, just out of spite, but no, Jerry, I don't hate you. But can you at least tell me if he's still alive? Yes, Jerry said. Yes, he is. I hope you can find comfort in that. And will he be alive tomorrow? She asked. Not even the Thunderhead can be sure about tomorrow, Jerry told her. Let's be satisfied with today. And that is the end of chapter 29. When next we return, we will delve into 30 and 31 for sure. But they are decent bit. Yeah, and actually that'll be part 4. Wow, part 3 was pretty short. But thank you all so much for watching this episode of Storytime with Freak. I hope you are enjoying it as we make progress through Storytime. Once we finish the Toll, we will be taking a month off of no Storytime episodes at all. No music covers, no reviews of anything. It is 100% going to be gaming content because we are the gamers of the round table, and I really do want to focus on our growth as a gaming channel. That being said, we are not ending Storytime. We are just taking 1 month to focus entirely on gaming after we finish the Toll. We still have a good bit left, so there's no reason to freak out. We also do have a magnificent new t-shirt available on our website that is a Storytime shirt. So if you guys enjoy the series, feel free to go check it out. Pick one up if you like it. I understand everybody right now with COVID-19 might not have the funds. I don't. But keep it in mind for future reference. And our conversational topic of the day will be, if you could see one book turned into a TV show or a movie that hasn't already been done, what would it be? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like on it. Subscribe if you haven't already and share it. Much love, and as always, stay freaky.